Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through a story about our presidential hopefuls on the Democratic side of the aisle. And you may be saying, whoa, Alex, aren't we a little bit ahead of the streak here? And the answer is yes, but guess what? They're announcing it themselves, or at least they're talking about the fact that they can't rule it out. So we're going to talk about it. Mainly our boy, Gavin Newsom. And our boy is not really a term of endearment, just a term of fact, because he's everywhere in the news, it feels like. So with that, let's actually jump in to our daily debate. Who do you think the roster will include? Kamala's been thrown around. Joe Biden may make a triumphant comeback. Hunter may hop on the ticket. Tim Walz may try again. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I want to hear what people have to think. Obviously, the major names everybody knows, but if you have some long shots, some out of nowheres, love to hear them. Throw them down there, because there's obviously blind spots in my perception, considering I look at a national level and there's not really anyone good in Virginia that I can think of that would parry their way into a presidential run. So with that, we get to the article today from the New York Times. Headline reads, Newsom says he will consider a 2028 presidential run after the midterms. Now, this feels like we're banding back to the good old days. We go back to a time of who the hopeful is going to be. And I started my podcast right around the beginning of the Biden term. And it was a little bit back and forth. The question of who's going to run next, who's going to run in 2024 came about, and Newsom seemed to be on the ticket, but Joe Biden seemed like he might give it a shot. We didn't know at some point, and then obviously he did. So we've been banding around these ideas, and I've been talking about Newsom running for president for quite some time. Who's going to be a VP pick? He was also on that list. So to pretend as though this is a novel idea and anybody's sitting there saying, yes, this is new, this is fresh. No, this is old, this is trodden. But that doesn't mean we can ignore it, and it doesn't mean that he doesn't have an appeal. Because as this author points out here in the middle section, which it's kind of buried mainly because the news itself is, he is saying that he's not going to shut down the idea, which is open and honest, and he even states that he would be lying if he said otherwise, which is good. I'm happy to have politicians that actually sound intrigued and with the idea of being honest. Maybe there's something there, but there is a certain characterization that they give about Newsom in the middle of this article that is very elucidating to the mentality of some people. Quote, Mr. Newsom is currently serving in his second term as governor, which ends in January 2027, and he is not eligible for re-election. He has acted as a foil to the Trump administration, their policies, and political maneuvering, pushing back against the presence of federal troops in Los Angeles, leading the effort to redraw the state's congressional maps to counter similar Republican efforts in Texas, and even mocking the president's social media style. So this harkens back to two things in my mind. Number one is being a foil to Trump, being that opposition, being able to push back, being a bit of a troll. We saw that, him testing it out for a little bit. I actually think that harkens back to Donald Trump initially, not necessarily in that he was a direct foil to Hillary Clinton, but to speak to his outside nature, his pushing back, his trolliness, his willing to get down in the mud. He's not above most political arguments. He's willing to go anywhere to do things. That reminds me very much of how Donald Trump handled his campaign. The other comparison is how Mr. DeSantis, Ron DeSantis, current governor of Florida, when he was gearing up for 2024, he's going out and being really combative with the media. He's not in the same vein as Newsom when it comes to being willing to go anywhere, but he is very combative. He has that trolly nature, though in a more brushed up way. The media hits, the quick 2-second sound bites of him shutting people down. That feels like a playbook that Newsom may fall into, trying to become and stay relevant going into 2028. And we see how that worked out for Ron DeSantis. Then again, that has an incumbent in the race on that side of things. So I understand why you would readily say that that comparison is not apt, or at least basing any analysis off of it is not apt. But I think that Newsom's trodden in trying to stay in the headlines rather than simply being in the headlines because of what he's doing. But some of these moves actively feel like the redistricting in California. That is something that the Senate and the House of California can do without Newsom getting in there and being loud, proud, and annoying. And it feels as though he's actually trying to take advantage of it in order to get into the national spotlight. Those sort of moves feel desperate, and we'll see if they pan out for him. But this author does bandy about some other non-normal people who have at least engaged with the idea. You have your Whitmers, your Pritzkers, maybe your Wes Moores are not mentioned in this article, but that's name that I've heard thrown around, especially coming from Virginia. But then there's one other one besides Kamala Harris, who on Saturday also said that she's not going to rule it out. Quote, she said, I am not done. And then the last one, which I thought was more interesting, is, quote, Rahm Emanuel, the former Chicago mayor who served as Biden's administration's ambassador to Japan. He's weighing a run, apparently. And Rahm is a political figure through and through. He is an apparatchik. He has been on both sides of it, fundraising, and as well as the candidacy side, as well as governing, obviously, being the mayor of Chicago. And that's a name that I didn't see bandied about previously, and I wonder how that will turn out. Another Chicago revival from the Democratic Party. We had our East Coast elite revival with Joe Biden, the working class relief for the party, who had seemed to go towards the elites for a while. And then California kind of got their day. They got their chance at it with Kamala, and if they all fail and they turn back to Chicago, maybe that is the path forward. Maybe Obama's legacy is not actually being a African-American president, being one of the most progressive presidents in the modern era, but maybe it's turning Democrat politics back towards Chicago. That would be interesting. I don't know how that will pan out for them, but I'm intrigued by the notion of this. So what is his actual statement? What is Newsom's actual statement? Because we're bearing the lead, and honestly, this was always going to be a way to parry into the broader conversation, but Newsom's comments actually matter here. Quote, yeah, he said, adding that saying otherwise, quote, I'd just be lying, and I can't do that. The interview was taped on Thursday in San Jose, according to CBS. And then, quote, his remarks on Sunday were not the first indication Mr. Newsom could run in 2028. In July, he met with Democratic voters in South Carolina, a pivotal primary state, which some saw as an early attempt to lay the groundwork for a run, end quote. And that's, of course, it. They're doing their pre-gaming. They're going out to these communities in South Carolina now that it's the first state in the primary cycle. I believe that is still technically accurate, though it could be wrong. New Hampshire could still be there. And Iowa, obviously, getting surpassed there. Whew, so sad for Iowa. But point overall, they are going and testing the waters. They're getting some name recognition up. They're meeting with local leaders. They're seeing if they can build a coalition. They're seeing if people will back them. They're seeing if it's even worth risking their political capital to do this. And if Newsom comes to the conclusion by 2028, remember, 3 years away, if he comes to the conclusion, he would have to announce by 2027. So actually more like 2 years away. But if he comes to the conclusion that it's not valuable, that he can't do it, that it's going to do more reputational damage, and he needs to go do something else, become a senator for California, which is going to be really hard with Adam Schiff trying to lock up the only appearingly open seat, then we're really going to have an interesting field if this man decides to drop out. I wouldn't say the California governor is heir apparent, but he definitely has a energy that would imply so. And he's been a part of the conversation for so long that as long as he doesn't mess it up in these next few years, there's no way we can easily count him out. I think his political career has been leading here, and I would not be surprised if years on I'm saying on this podcast in real life. And President Newsom, that doesn't mean I want to say it, doesn't mean I'm looking forward to more California-style policies in the White House, but that doesn't mean I would be surprised. So, with that, if you want to read today's article, you can find the link in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also, down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as now on Apple Podcasts. I've been saying it recently because, it's true. It's pretty big. It took me a while to get past some of their weird distribution rules, and not to get past it makes it sound really bad and illegitimate, but to make sure it was done right. And if you want to check out the links to these episodes every single Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can go follow the Twitter handle at your DailyFlip. I also, on that Twitter account, post the links on Tuesday and Thursday to 6 in 6, which is our international news segment. It's about 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.